Introducing Travel Well podcast series presented by packitup.org.
This is the Travel Well podcast series where we explore and share the stories of perseverance, resilience, and overcoming the challenges of living abroad. I'm your host, Christian Brown, global citizen, writer, and entrepreneur. Let's get into it. All right, you are tuned in to the Travel Well podcast. I'm your host, Christian Brown. Super happy to come to you today with a friend of mine, Dr. Aditi Joshi. And now I met Aditi at WeWork, which is one of my favorite places to network and meet people. We met at the happy hour. I think I heard her speaking English maybe, or I met a friend of hers, and I'm meeting Dr. Aditi Joshi, and she's in digital health. And so we clicked instantly, and that was about a year and a half ago. And since then, we've just been staying connected, keeping up with each other's journey, collaborating on some things. And so I'm happy to have you here to talk about your journey living abroad and personal growth. So first, thank you for your time, and thank you for being here.
Thanks, Christian. Great to be here.
Yeah, so let's get started. So can you just introduce yourself to the listeners and share what motivated you to move here to Paris, France, where we are today?
So, as you said, I'm a doctor. I'm an emergency medicine physician, and I got into digital health about 11 years ago. And the short story is, and we can dive into it, but I moved here because it was the first time that I could work remotely, and I've always wanted to live somewhere new. And through a series of travel adventures, I decided on Paris, France.
Yeah, and so what is it about Paris for you?
I wish I had a very set answer, but what happened in 2021, I quit my job. I was working at a hospital and I decided to travel. A friend of mine just happened to be here, and so I came to visit her, and I just really liked it. I mean, I'd been to Paris before, I'd been to France before, but something was different about this time. I felt more comfortable and met a lot of really interesting people, and so many people were like, yeah, just move here. And so I stayed for the full 3 months that my passport would allow.
Yeah.
And I went home and I was thinking, okay, where could I move in the US? I work remotely now, I've changed my career, so what could I do? And nowhere was really calling me. I was, thinking of moving back to New York, but I was like, let me try this. Let me apply for a visa to France, and if I get it, I'll go there. And if I don't, well, I guess I'll go back to New York. But as you can tell, I successfully got a visa, so here I am.
Yeah, it's so cool. And so a lot of our listeners are remote workers, and they probably are thinking about what would it look like to actually move abroad. But there are a few things that hold people back. One is just finances. Thinking about how to just get control of finances to move abroad. Another thing is just fear. So did you find yourself faced with any type of fear when it came to your decision to move abroad? And if so, how did you overcome that?
Certainly. I mean, the finance one is much more practical to answer.
Okay, that one too, yeah.
Yeah, well, the finance thing, I think, I already had a remote job. I was able to work from here, so that made it a lot easier. Also, I've been in my career for a very long time, and so that made it just easier to try to convince how I could make a go of it here and get the particular type of visa that I have that I could be allowed to work. But I think that could be a very big thing for a lot of people, but I won't answer that. I was in a different situation than probably a lot of people. But as far as the fear, I think there's a lot of different types of fear of moving abroad. There's the first is, what are other people going to say? What are they going to talk about? Is it going to hold me back? Am I going to lose all my friends? Is it going to be hard on my relationships? What's going to happen to my family? So there's that personal aspect. Yeah. Then there's just the, what do people think about it? People have a lot of opinions when you try and do something and change your life. Now, those opinions can be positive, but if you're hearing some of the negative ones and you intake it, that can create a fear that makes you not want to do something. And then 3, but I think this is a real reality, it does affect your career if you're going to be working remotely. So if you're someone like myself that still primarily works in the US, it does make it a little bit harder. But for me, the fear was, okay, and what's the worst case scenario? I don't succeed and I move back home. One of my best friends, so her name is Shivangi, we have been friends since we were 8 years old. Wow. She knows everything about me. So she told me, I was having lunch with her or something, and she said, listen, this decision, moving to France, she's like, if you don't like it, go back. There are very few decisions in life that are irreversible. And she's like, this is not one of them.
Wow.
And that is absolutely true. You can always go back.
Yeah, I love that. And I like how you laid out what some of the other fears are too. The fear of what people think, family. Let's talk about some more of those, right? It's how would you provide encouragement to people who may be held back by the idea of, what other people are thinking, either in the country that they're going to or their home country?
I think that's a big one. We have so many voices telling us what we can and can't do, what's right for us. But the reality is you have to understand what's right for yourself. So in general, I'm definitely a person, though, that does not take in negative feedback unless it's... Let me say this a different way. So I used to teach in the medical schools. We teach, and I've been a doctor for a long time. And in the emergency room, it can be a rough place. And here's what I realized when people are giving you feedback or giving you opinions. You have to look at it and determine what are they trying to say, because most of the time they're talking about something that's bothering them. It has nothing to do with you. Almost nothing is personal, right? It's really about where they're coming from. So I would take a look and say, okay, what is this person saying? Is it really something that they care about me and something they're worried about me? Or is it their fear coming out from my decision? So once you separated that out, so now immediately, so if it's something about them that has nothing to do with me, I take that opinion, throw it right in the trash, right? That has nothing to do with me. That's for them to figure out for themselves.
Yeah.
And then the next one is that if there's something that someone says, hey, so here's one for me. So people were like, if you move there, if you don't work there, is that going to really affect your career because that's important to you? That's someone who cares about me just asking. They weren't saying don't do it. They were just, how are you going to deal with that? What do you want to do? And that information I can at least take and then think it through. And so for anybody who's having these fears, I think it's a really good way to take a look and say, okay, which is actually something relevant to me, something that's caring about me, an opinion that someone might want me to do, versus things that are not. And if it's not, don't listen to it. This is true for all parts of life, not just moving abroad.
Yeah, I was just about to say that. I was like, that's so good and so insightful because it can be used for so many different aspects of life, right?
Absolutely.
And then one of the unique things about this podcast is that we sit at the intersection of global mobility and travel, but also wellness, personal growth. And so what's been a significant personal growth experience or impact that you've had because of moving abroad?
It brought me a lot of confidence in changing my life. I feel like I've had multiple lives and multiple types of careers, and so I'm a little bit older than Christian, everybody, just a little. Not a little, but but because of that, there's different times that I thought, okay, this is really something I have to push through to take the next step. And so it feels like one of those, but what's unique about it is it's not really a career push through or it's really a personal breakthrough, because you have to understand, okay, how am I going to deal with the bureaucracy?
Yeah.
I just plopped myself in this country. I spoke the language a little bit, but not really fluent enough to really, really work here or things like that. It's certainly gotten better, but still, you're moving to a new country. You don't really know that many people. I have no family here. So all of those things were something I had to really think about, but it made me realize that I have every ability to create a community. I have made incredible friends, an incredible network. I know a lot of really nice people, really interesting people. And I built that from scratch, and it made me realize that I have that ability to do that anywhere.
Wow.
I think that gives you a lot of confidence and realize that you can build joy anywhere in the world.
Dang. It reminds me of the quote that says, wherever you go, there you are.
There you are.
Right? Because
right.
it's once you build up this encouragement internally, and it's confidence, it's internal confidence that follows you no matter where you go in the world.
Absolutely.
So I think that's really cool. And you talked about your network and building community. So I did a poll on my Instagram yesterday, and I told my following that I was going to interview a few people about personal growth and moving abroad. And I asked, what are some of the topics that are most interesting to you? And the option that had the most votes was networking and building a network abroad. So how did you go about building your network abroad, and then what's some advice that you can give to other people who may be trying to do the same thing?
Absolutely. I think there's two types of networks, where it's like the acquaintance, friendship, personal network, and then there's the work networks. I think we use the term friend, especially Americans, I'll say this,
For sure.
maybe not the French, probably, I don't think. We use that term very loosely. We say everybody's a friend when often they're like work colleagues or acquaintances, really. And so that's why I talk about personal network as well, because I think that can be add to it. So for the personal, I'll start there, because when I first came, I was like, all right, I need to make some friends. I don't want to be alone here, because what's the point?
Right.
And so I went to, the easiest way to do it was through expat communities, because
Online or in person?
it was online first. I did do some in-person ones. I started out, but I actually found them on Facebook or on other social media apps, and just really went to meet some people. And if I found someone I really hit it off with, I'd become friends, and then we would meet their friends. And very quickly, I got a group of very good friends. And then once you get there, it's like, okay, well, let me expand the network to find other people who have interests similar to mine or want to do the same types of activities. And I do use like a social app for that. And then I also just reach out to people that I might find or see at events. I think, I think when we talk about fear again, I think there's a lot of fear to this.
Yeah, for
People
sure.
are very afraid to ask someone because they don't want to be rejected. We talk about, rejection in relationships, but you can be rejected as a friend, and it's painful, right? It's painful. Friend breakups are painful.
Yeah, they are.
But the reality is, it's just like anything else. You got to take a chance. And I have found so many people here are just waiting for someone to take a chance on them and maybe ask them. Because
wow.
a lot of people are like, oh, I would love to come. I just never thought about it.
Wow.
Now, I feel like when we talk about cultural differences, I feel very American in France. In the U.S., I don't know about you, but sometimes I'm, not always very American. I get treated as an Indian person, even though I was born in the U.S. But here, I am very American. And some of my habits are like that, including inviting anyone and everyone I know.
Yeah.
Like the party you came to, it was a very, very mix of people.
Yeah, it was super fun. It was super cool, and I think that's it's like I feel like it's a mix of the American and the French culture. Because one thing I've learned about the French culture is that it's very close knit when it comes to friend groups.
Yes.
Right. Most of the time, people don't really go out to clubs. They'll just go out with their friends and then go to a cafe with their friends, or have apéro at someone's house, right? And so I think that's really cool. But then the American side of it is like being open to talking to strangers.
Right. Exactly.
And so I've discovered this weird mix of the two that I kind of like. Having that just ability to go and talk to strangers, but also having a few friends that will invite me to out with others. So it's this cool it's this cool mix that I enjoy. And so I think that's one of like the privileges of, I guess, coming from the American culture to more of a European culture. Is like we have this tendency to just be more friendly.
True, but I agree with you. I've also taken on more of having a close-knit group also, because I think I was a more frenzied, especially when I lived in New York, for example, having like multiple friend groups. And now I've taken that on too, the way you describe, and there is a beauty in that as well. Yeah,
I love that. And so before you moved to Europe, what type of, I guess, limiting beliefs, do you know what I mean by limiting beliefs? Like things that you thought were true that ended up just being false and being something that limited you from growing. What type of limiting beliefs did you have before moving? And then can you give me an example of like a moment where that limiting belief was proven to be false?
That's a really great question. I feel like I'm dealing with one of them right now. So one of the limiting beliefs that I am thinking through. So one was, I sort of mentioned it earlier, is that you can't really change your life. So, for example, in my career, right? So when you become a doctor, it's a very straight process. You do your undergrad, you do your medical school. I know it's different here, but it's a long process. Then you do your training, and then you practice medicine, and that's what people do for the rest of their lives generally. And so me taking a chance in becoming a remote worker, going into health technology was different, and it made me realize that you can change your life. So that was one thing. But that seems like an easy thing. So when I came here, I've been having this realization recently that maybe in the future it's not going to be healthcare forever. Maybe it's going to be some other aspect that I will get into. Even though I realize that you can change your life at any time. Maybe you can change even bigger things of what you thought your life was going to be. It may not be as limiting, but I think, we think of ourselves in a certain way. So I define myself as a doctor, for example, in this context, in this example we're giving. But that doesn't have to be the case forever, right? And so it's a good thing, but there's also a bit of grief with it because you're changing your life, so that means you're giving something up. And it could be bigger, it could be better, but it's different.
Interesting. So is it like the battle is between kind of what you know and what you have known, and then the unknown?
Absolutely.
Right,
the unknown. Because what am I doing? Like, who is this doctor who decided to do all these different things, right?
Yeah.
And it's, what if I decide to leave medicine entirely? Then what does that mean for me? I haven't done it yet, everybody. Still here, but, it's just things I'm playing around with, and this
I love
idea.
That. Yeah, and let's dive deeper into that, because I think someone who's in the position where they're thinking about moving abroad, they're probably 100% faced with that dilemma, right? The fear of the unknown. And so how are some, and I'm curious because like you're a doctor too, so you have some like clinical knowledge. What are some strategies for dealing with the fear of the unknown? I like the framework you gave for if someone is like projecting their fear onto you.
Yes.
What if it's internal fear and the fear of the unknown? How should you?
We certainly have plenty of that to deal with ourselves. So I have always found that if I have a fear about something that's coming through, I can almost feel it in my body. I can feel it. I think I'll say this. So people who I recommend meditation, there could be other types of meditation. People do dance, people do martial arts, but whatever it is, something that really something that gives you some focus on your body and understanding your mind, something that lets you allow you to do that, because then it becomes very clear when a fear is coming up for me. But sometimes we don't recognize our own fears. So what helps me sometimes is like thinking through, all right, so, the fear of I'm going to come here and not have enough finances to work. Okay, so I'll think through it because I'm very logical in some ways. I'll write it out. I'll be like, okay, what's going to happen? This fear is coming out. I can feel it. I feel this fear. I feel this like in my body. I feel it coming into my brain as well. I'm going to write it out. All right, so what is this fear? Where is it coming from? And I'll just absolutely write out the worst case scenario. And then when you write out the worst case scenario, you'll be like, okay, that's really not going to happen. Like, this is not going to happen.
So good.
And then it gives you also, I find that the more you do that, it actually automatically gives you solutions on how to deal with that fear.
Yeah.
And there's plenty of different ways to talk about stress relief. There's two types of stress that we have. The one that's the good stress, the one that gets us to do things. People think it's an oxymoron, good stress, but it's like what keeps us safe in the world, right? So it's like a stress response. I'm using the clinical term, so not the one that we're using over, but it's a stress response, and that's okay if it's like keeping us focused, getting our goals done, making sure that we're staying safe, understanding our environment, things like that. And then the bad stress, though, is if those fears, we internalize them and we keep them in our body. All these things that like haven't happened, right? It can show up as anxiety, depression, all of these things. And so, and those with mental health disorders can absolutely attribute that, right? It's hard to get through, and sometimes you need the help of therapy, medication, whatever it is. But the reality is, like, anybody, even without needing the medication, every human has an anxiety and stress response and depressive response, and can. And so you have to just like figure out where it's coming from, and then figure out what works for you. So like I mentioned, meditation will work for me. Working out works for me. Like I need like hard workouts to like get it through. I used to practice martial arts a lot. Oh, cool. But whatever works for you, but it has to be part of that. What they say, it's like what is that old adage? It's like a ounce of prevention is a pound for cure. I did that wrong. It's an American expression, and I still messed it up. But something about how if you do a little bit to keep yourself healthy, it's actually going to make sure you still stay healthy in the long run. Like it may seem like a lot of time to spend 30 minutes on self-care, But if it's not, if you can't get through your day and get anything done, it's not.
Yeah, yeah, that's so interesting. I like the idea of letting the fear out, right? Because for me, I suffer with anxiety a lot, and I think part of the reason is because when I have these feelings or this fear, I try to keep it inside, and then it just builds up until it paralyzes me.
Yes.
Right. But I like this idea of, okay, I have this fear. Let me write it out. Let me just, because writing out is a process of, making it external.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. And I do this in my brain, which also helps me. Anyone can take it if this helps you, but instead of being like, I'm anxious, I will say, I have a feeling of anxiety. I have a feeling of. So it keeps it separate, sort of what you're saying. It keeps it external from me, so then I can deal with it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's a good strategy that could be helpful. Hey, so check this out. I want to take a few seconds to tell you about Blemish. So I'm the co-founder and CEO of a startup called Blemish, based in France, and it's the whole reason I really moved to Paris. And our goal is to unlock access to mental health and care resources globally. So when we do that is through community. We throw events all around the world, and we have a community of people who are committed to bettering their mental health. And as a part of that, we created these bracelets, these Blemish stacking bracelets. And each one has a different positive quote on it. And it's just a reminder, a daily reminder for you to stay positive, for you to know that you're one connection away, for you to be aware of the growth that you've experienced, to know that you can execute with excellence, to know that you never lose, you either win or you learn. And so these bracelets are a great daily reminder, and they just look good, right? You can stack them, wear them with other bracelets, but the ultimate goal is to give you that daily reminder to keep going, stay positive, and do the work. And so if you go to blemish.com/store right now, you'll be able to see the bracelets, read about them, see some pictures of people wearing them, and you'll be able to get one for you or for a loved one. So go to blemish.com, that's BLIMISH.com/store. You can find all the information that you need. All right, back to the episode. Okay. Right back to it. So yeah, cultural differences. What are some of the biggest cultural differences that you've noticed in France, and then if there's another culture that you have experience with and is top of mind?
So I think the French are definitely more open to conflict than Americans are, and not in a bad way. I actually think it's interesting because it means that you can have a conversation, disagree with somebody, and then still go away being friends. Or Americans, we're not as good at that. And there's probably something positive in the fact that you can have these conflicts and move forward. Now, I don't work in France, so I can't speak to a lot of the things that I've heard people say, but it sounds like it's much more formal in the way that people address each other in some manner. But on the flip side, it seems that there's still much more of a camaraderie. People hang out with their colleagues a lot more. In the U.S., I would not necessarily hang out with my colleagues. Some of the ones that I was friends with, but I certainly was not a practice to hang out with our colleagues. So I find that really interesting. Yeah, right. I don't know anything about it. But I also, people are very serious about food. They're very serious about wine. Even someone you may not expect. It's such a stereotype, but it's so true that people be like, well, I know this wine, and this is how you drink it, and this is how you do it. And I'm just fascinated because I don't know there's anything that we have in the U.S. that's so so similar in that way. It's such
barbecue,
a big
in the South, barbecue.
Yeah, I guess people have strong opinions about. People have a strong opinion about pizza. Actually, I'm from Chicago, and people have really strong where you're from. That's true, but it's so different, right? There isn't anything like that that we have. But yeah, there's definitely more formality.
Yeah, I think it's interesting you talked about the conflict piece, because for me, one of my intentions for like my character development coming to France was to be more blunt, to be more candid, because since I was a child, I don't like confrontation, I don't like conflict, so I'm very avoidant.
Yeah.
But I knew before coming here that the French are they'll say whatever's on their mind, and so I was like, I wanna become more like that.
Has it worked?
So it's interesting. Right now I'm at this place where I speak my mind way more. But now recently I've learned that loss of empathy is a sign of burnout.
Oh, yes. Yep.
And so I know you know a bunch about.
Yep.
And so now I'm curious, and I'm like going through this internal dialogue in real time. Am I becoming more blunt and more direct, or am I losing empathy for people and for things?
That's a really good question. Here's what I'm going to say about burnout, though. So I had burnout twice, everybody on here. The first was in the emergency room. But I don't think they're the same thing. So
Okay.
I'll describe what the loss of empathy was for me, and this is like the absolute bottom. So basically, it was almost like I could not feel emotions at all at work. So I, like nothing in front of me could I even relate to. I was almost like dead inside.
Wow.
And so that loss of empathy, and again, that's an extreme, but I was pretty bad. I had pretty bad burnout. And so you have to it's almost like there's nothing there to even hang on to. Whereas conflict is different. Now let me say this. So loss of empathy can make you say things that can be rude and awful and seem candid in conflict, but it's not coming from a place of, oh, I am just going to give my opinion and have like an agreeable discussion with somebody else or respect the other person. It's coming from a place of, I actually cannot feel anything. I do not care about this other person.
Interesting. Okay.
Which is a very different thing.
For sure.
And so I definitely don't think it's the same. This is not what I think this is happening here. I think there is just a culture of, discussion and being able to argue with people and being able to say what you want. It's accepted.
Yeah.
And so that's very different, right? It's not coming from necessarily a place of negativity. It's coming from a place of, no, well, you asked me a question, so I'm going to give you the respect to give you the honest answer.
Yeah, it's welcome, and it's like this culture of debate that the French have, and I've seen it so closely just having throwing events here and having a cultural diverse crowd, and just seeing how just different people converse and debate, right, and express their opinions.
It's true. Oh my God, I have to tell you a funny story about Christian, everybody.
Uh-oh.
When he was at my party, and he was meeting one of my French friends who was describing to him what foie gras was.
Oh, wow.
And so I walk over, because Christian looks absolutely shell-shocked. Your face was I didn't know what happened. I was like, what happened? And Baptiste is just like, oh yeah, I was just telling him how foie gras is made. I was laughing.
Yeah. I've never heard of it. That was my first time ever hearing about foie gras. And I don't think I've tried it since
Oh yeah, Baptiste was like, yeah, that's just how it is, and that's how we make it. And it was like, no apology, nothing about the cruelty of it, because that's what they talk about in the U.S. a lot. But your face is just hilarious.
Yeah, it's so cool though. Even learning about just the different food, which is another cool thing about living abroad, is being introduced to different type of foods. And on that note, what's been your favorite country for cuisine?
Oh, this is going to be such a cliche, but Indian food is my favorite.
Okay.
I grew up on it. It's also so diverse because each area is very different. And it has probably the biggest profile of different types of flavors and spices than any other cuisine in the world. But I'm not going to say that I'm impartial. So I love Indian food, but I love lots of different foods. Food is awesome everywhere. It depends on what you're looking for.
Very true.
I do love French food. Confit du Canal is my favorite. The bread, obviously, is great. Yeah.
The pastries.
All of it.
Yeah, that's good. Awesome. So looking forward, how do you see your experiences abroad influencing your next chapter of life, your future plans?
So whatever happens, so right now I'm planning to stay in France, but maybe, who knows, maybe I won't. But if that happens, it makes me realize that I can live anywhere in the world. There is the option to do anything. The world is huge. It makes you realize how big the world is. Yeah. How many choices we have when we think we have this limited set of choices. The reality is we have more choices than we think. It's just forcing ourselves to do it, to look for it, to find those chances. So I think of people. So I hear this commonly, that people, especially my age, because a lot of people my age have kids, or they're married, have kids, right, and they have young kids. Yeah. And so a lot of them are like, well, can't move abroad, or it's going to be too hard to change, or things like that. I have a number of friends who have taken their young kids all over the world and lived all over the world because they wanted to. They figured it out and made it happen. And so I think that we can create our own limitations any place we want, but you could also find ways to make the life that you want.
Love that. Yeah, I love that soundbite. That's great. I'm going to take that. Awesome. So now I want to get into the next section. Rapid fire questions. So super quick. First one is coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Favorite local dish?
Coffee du canard.
What's one app that you can't live without?
Oh boy. Instagram.
Morning or night person?
Night.
One word to describe your first day abroad.
Comfortable.
Comfortable. Amazing. Okay, cool. Well, that's it. Well, Aditi, thank you so much for joining me, for sharing your insights. It was amazing. And let the listeners know how they can find you and get in touch with you.
Thanks, Christian. It was great to be here. You can find me on Instagram at Dr. Aditi U Joshi, and my website, draditiujoshi.com.
Amazing. Well, awesome, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Travel Well podcast, where we sit at the intersection of travel and wellness. And look forward to seeing you on the next one. Bye.